Hi, my name is Mel Wolverson, and today I'm going to show you how to do an Excel budget. We're going to start from scratch so that you don't need any exercise files. I will be using a Mac, however, it's pretty much the same on a PC or even Office 365. Even Google Docs is very similar. Here we go. I'm going to put in B6, cell B6, in for January. Then I'm going to place my cursor down in the bottom right-hand corner so that the plus turns dark. And I will drag across until I get to December. I'll release, and you'll notice that autofills all the way across. It knows that Jan is short for January, and it goes ahead and autofills across, also using the abbreviations for the rest, which I think is really great. Over on A7 now, I'm going to put in some expenditures. So I'll put in rent / house, food, travel, and this could be gas or whatever along those lines, car, and electric. Some people might have gas heating, water. Okay, just some bills. Think of all the things that you pay over the course of the month. Oh, maybe you have a card you're trying to pay off, or maybe you just have a card you use. All right, put as many of those in there as you want. It's completely up to you, whatever you use, and that'll be fine. Then, under January, for rent house, or whichever the first one is, put in 0. Okay, just a 0. Now, once you've done that, up at the top, you should see a whole bunch of different types of options for money. If you click where you see general, you'll see currency and accounting. The main difference between currency and accounting is one is on the left side of the cell and one is on the right side of the cell. That's the main difference. But we'll go ahead and do currency. And also notice if you want to round it to the nearest dollar, just underneath currency, there's the .00, decreased decimal, and increased decimal. So I can decrease that to the dollar. You can see in the cell it's changing, or I can increase that back if I need to the penny. It just depends on how you need it. It doesn't really matter as far as what number you put in. If you put in 3.56, it still keeps that as part of the math, but it only displays, well, let's see, if it was 3.56, it would display as 4 because it's over half. I can just select the cell and type in 90 and hit enter, and it formats to $90. Of course, that's not enough for a rent, so I'll change that to, I don't know, 600, which is really good rent, a really, really good rent in some places. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in some random numbers here. And notice I'm going to select the first one that has the formatting that we like. I'm going to go up to the Home tab, and I'm going to select Format, little paintbrush, and then I'm going to click, hold, and drag to highlight the other two. And notice it automatically formats those into the right number and the right format. Now, here's another fun thing with autofill. Let's say you're just starting and you don't want to format each one of these individually. You can just put in $0. It's already formatted. And then autofill down. And then once you've autofilled down, you can autofill all the way across. So you've just automatically not only added content to every single cell, but you have also formatted every single one of those using the same format. You can always change them later, but it gives you a nice starting point. Now, we've done cost, but we haven't done money in. I recommend just skipping a few cells, 2 or 3 down, and then we'll do income. I work for the University of Missouri, so I'll put, no, I don't want anybody to even think this is realistic at all. I will put in random. And then maybe you have other income. Maybe you have a second person working in the home, and maybe you have some side projects. I'll just put in side proj. And I recommend always having an other category. If nothing else, you might get a birthday card with some money in it, and that categorizes as other quite nicely. You can redo the months if you want. You don't have to. You could just look up and see that that's the month you're on. Or you can go ahead and I'll put in Jan and autofill across just so it looks tidy. Okay. Now I can do the same thing for the formatting. I can select this cell right here, the B7, which is my first rent cost, and I'll copy that, Control C or Command C on a Mac. And then I'll go down to my first income, and I'll do Control V for victory, and then I can autofill across, and then I can autofill down, showing that you can do it either way. Now, for my first random income, I'm going to put in, what's a lot? I'll put in 8,000. That seems like a lot to me. It's probably not a lot to everybody. And then for secondary job, let's say secondary job is 4,000. And side project, maybe the side project brings in $100 a month. And other, well, this one might not be every month. My birthday is in May, and so I will put in $50 for my birthday. Once you have put those numbers in, then we can do maybe a little formatting. So up here, I'll select this chunk of content. Oh, I should mention there is a shorter way of doing that. So if you click right here, the first piece of content, for instance, and then if you hold down Shift and then hit the down arrow, you can select one at a time, going down. This is a little bit different on a Mac, I believe, but try it out on a PC as well. If you hold down Command plus Shift, it'd probably be Control and Shift on a PC, that allows you to select down to the bottom of the content. Now notice it doesn't get my income, the random, because it only goes down to where the content stops, to where there's an empty cell, and then that's all you get. So I'll hold down Command and Shift again, and I will go right, and notice it selects all of them to the right. So that's a nice quick way to select content if you want to use that. I use that to select that chunk of content, my months up there at the top. And I'm going to come up here where it says no fill currently. I've got a little yellow color there. And I will choose blue. And next to the blue, just to the left, I'll make that bold. And I'll make it a little bigger. I'll make it 14-point font, just to give it a little bit of a heading look. Then I'm going to copy the formatting for that and paint it on the second one. So I only have to do it once. Our last column here, after December, we probably want a total, because it's always nice to know what your total is for the year, how much you've spent per year on rent or on food or whatever. It gives you a nice way to look back at the year and say, oh, did I really spend that much? I'll go ahead and put in total. Notice I'm just hitting enter, and it's going ahead and adding that styling in automatically. So that's kind of nice. And so for the total, I can use autofill, but I can't do it the way I did before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change some of these numbers just so I can see that there's something in there. I'm just going to change some of these numbers at random just to check, make sure it's working. So now I'll go back to my total cell, and up at the top on the Home tab, you'll see AutoSum. And if you click on the AutoSum button, it highlights all of the content next to it. Sometimes it's not accurate, but in this case it is. And AutoSum is just auto add all of these things. And so I'll just hit enter to confirm that yes, that is exactly what I want to add. And it goes ahead and does the math for me. Now if I go back and select it, you'll see up here in the formula bar, it has added equals, sum, and then the content that I want to sum, B7 through M7. And so that way I can change it. If I add in another column, if I add in more content, I can always come up here to this formula area and change that. It's kind of nice. But now, once I have created this formula, I can go to the bottom right-hand corner, my little autofill plus, drag all the way down, and it adds all of the different columns, and it understands that I've gone down a row, and so therefore the math should be for that row. Go down a row, the math should be for that row. So you can see how the numbers are changing, and that shows you that it's working. Now if I copy this first one, Control C again, or Command C, and I paste it, notice again, it figures it out. Oh, hey, you've copied the same thing, but you're down several rows. Well, that works. we can do that. And so it auto adjusts, which is nice. And then I can autofill down the rest. And now as I add in more information throughout the year, let me just add all these up. Let's say that my side projects were exactly the same all year, which is unlikely. And we'll leave the birthday money as it is. Okay, so now I have the totals for the whole year. We also probably want a vertical total because a lot of times it's nice to know how much did I spend in January? How much did I spend in February? Does that match my checkbook? Is the bank being honest? So I'll put in total right below card, and I'll do the same down here. I'll select the first empty cell underneath the January content. I'll select auto sum again because we are adding all these up again. Notice automatically it says, oh, I see numbers above me and nowhere else right next to me, speaking of the cell. And so it's going to choose the right thing. It doesn't always choose the right thing, but in most cases it does. So yes, and now we have this total here. And just like before, we can autofill all the way across. Now, in the case of the last one, it is totaling up all of your totals. So that gives you your total expenditure for the whole year in that last cell. So I'm going to select this content, Shift, Command, right arrow key, and I'll make that. And I'm going to select this as well because I want it to stand out as a total. And I'll just do a light gray, just like that, just making it stand out. I'll select these, make these bold. Make these bold. First, I'll go ahead and do my auto sums. And then I'm just going to autofill all the way across, just like I did. I'll copy the formatting. Notice again, I'm going to the little paintbrush button on the Home tab. I'll paint that in. Notice when I did that, it noticed that the first cell says total, and the second cell is not bold. Okay, see that? So total is bold, the next one isn't, and it realized that, and so it did the same down here where it's painting. I'll highlight these totals, make that gray. There we go. So we're starting to have a little budget. Now, honestly, if you just want a really simple budget, this is all you need. I'm going to get a little bit fancier. So up at the top, I'm going to put January again, and I'll autofill across, and I'm going to put income for the unit I'm measuring here, and cost, and then total. Now, I want my January income to be the same thing as the total down here because, the same thing down here. So my total January income, I want to pull that number. Up in the function area, I'll put in equals, and then I will just click on the cell that I want to pull from. So I'll select this total for income and then hit enter. And it goes ahead and totals the entirety of January. It's just pulling the information from the cell and drops it in there. And I'll go ahead and go across the whole way. I don't want January. Okay, so I got rid of January. And now I want to do the same thing with cost, all my outgoing expenses. So again, I'll go up to the formula bar. I always start with an equal sign when I'm doing a formula, and then I'll select the cell that I want to choose. So I'll choose my total, hit enter, and then notice there's 123, right? It's the total of all my expenses. And if I adjust this, so for travel, I'll put in $20 of gas and I don't know, let's say $300 car payment and $27 here. You can see it's going up, just putting in random numbers at this point. You can see it going up as it works through the numbers. And it's adjusting as well up here. So now I'll drag this all the way across. There we go. So that the cost is spread all the way across and all the formulas go across, and you can see the numbers are different. And then for the total, this will actually be a subtraction. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this better. For the total here, we want to subtract, right, the cost from the income. So it'll be income minus cost. That's why I did it in this order. And so instead of auto sum, I have more functions here, and I could go to the more functions, but I think subtraction, I can do that on my own. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the function bar. I'm going to type in equals. Then I'm going to click on the first item, so the income. Then I'm going to go back up to the function bar. I'm going to hit minus sign. Then I'm going to select cost. And that's it. That's all there is to the formula. I'm just subtracting one thing from another. So I hit enter, and now it gives me the remainder. So I had, let's say, $12,000 coming in for January. I only spent about $800. And so I have a total income, leftover money, of $11,000. So you can see how you can pare down maybe your monthly spending so that you have a little more left over. Let me go ahead and autofill all the way across. And then we're going to do the same thing that we did for these. We're going to have a vertical total as well as a horizontal total. So I'll put in total here, and then I'll add these up. I'll just autofill these across. Okay, now you notice that these show the pound sign. Well, that's not very helpful, but what it means is the number is too big to fit in this box. So the number is too large to fit in the current box. If I click on the border between N and O, the columns, and just expand that out, now you can see the numbers. And so they come back and you can appear. All right, so this would be my total at the end of the year. Now that is quite a lot of income and not a lot of outgoing, but I'm assuming that you would have more than $123 of rent or house over the course of 4 months, and so on and so forth. So this is the budget. Let's go ahead and copy the formatting. Copy the formatting here, and we'll copy the formatting here from here. There we go. Now that looks really nice and really tidy. Let me zoom out a little bit. One reason it's really handy to do something like this where you have the total income and cost right next to each other, and so you can do an even total, is the fact that you can now use this to graph your year. So you can select all of the totals from January to December, and then we'll go to Insert, and I will choose a chart. I'll go to Recommended Charts, and it gives me a series of charts to choose from. I'm going to go ahead and choose a clustered column in this case, although I think a line would do just as well. And now I can see what months are going to be really difficult for my chart. What months are going to be really difficult for my income. And as I change the numbers over here, the numbers for the content should change as well. I'm just typing random things in. And as you can see, oh, I spent a lot on food in October. Goodness gracious. Banquet. Somebody got married. Okay. And you can see that in October, I went a little over budget there. And that's how far down below it went. So you can also see the negative balances as if you have one. Hopefully you don't have one. And as soon as you change it, let's say it was a typo, it automatically adjusts. Let's say you want to reorganize these. Maybe so they're alphabetically organized. If so, if I want to do that, I'm going to go ahead and put in cost here and income, just so I have labels in this. I'll select this content, and I'll go to Insert and select Table. Because I selected my content, it automatically says, oh, you want to turn this content into a table? Okay. And I want it to say my table has headers. I want that to be checked because I want it to sort using those headers. There we go. So now it formats it a little bit differently. It formats it as a table. It does the alternating rows, which is kind of nice actually in most cases. It looks very professional. And now I can sort. So I can go to the little arrow next to cost, and I can say ascending. And now all of my costs are in alphabetical order. Now, unfortunately, it includes total in that and sorts that. Let me undo that. I just hit Control Z to undo all the way back to before it was a table. I can still select this content, select Insert and Table, say OK. I can now sort ascending, and you'll notice now the totals are not included, and so it did not sort the totals as well. If I come in here, I can still change these. So if I put in 123, notice the total down here did change. I'll do it again just to make sure you see. 123. Now it's increasing, and it's also increasing the totals over in the total on the right. So that's how you can create a table that will sort without messing up your total row. And you can do the same thing here. Now, one cool thing, once you have created a table, you can create a pivot table. So if I just drop my cursor in here somewhere, and I go to Insert, I can select Recommended Pivot Tables, and that'll actually allow me to create a pivot table, which is a sortable, changeable, very flexible table. And here we have, this is just a default pivot table that it chose for me. Here I have sum of total. And what it's done is it's created common amounts and then kind of drop those in there. Now that's not really going to work for me. So I'm going to uncheck that. You'll notice as I'm checking things in the pivot table builder, it's removing them until all it says is, hey, there should be a pivot table here. All right, so I'm going to select January. I'm going to put that in the column section. And then I decide, you know what? I like it in the rows section. I can just click on it in the column section, drag it down to rows. Now I have rows. And now I can do cost. And let's say I want cost in the column section. And so now what it's telling me is it's got the different amounts, and it's got what each one of those has. I'll add February. Notice it drops in February, but it drops in February as a value. I don't want that. I want it as a column. And count of cost, it dropped in there automatically. I'll just take that out, maybe make that a filter. And maybe for the values, I just want the totals. Oh, I did not need two of those. Okay, so now I get the totals, and it's sorting rows. And so it's sorting. Now, with a basic budget, you do not really need a pivot table. If you have a more complex budget, maybe you have a business budget with various different fields, various different areas, this can be really handy for figuring out, all right, how much giraffe food do we use in December in this section of the zoo? Right? Little things like that that can be more complicated and head-turning to try to figure out with a regular table. You can play around with a pivot table and really get exactly what you want and then create a chart out of that. So super helpful. Let me go back to sheet 1. So down at the bottom, it automatically dropped that pivot table onto a separate sheet. So I have sheet 2 down at the bottom and sheet 1. If I want to rename these, I can double click on the name and type in budget. And I'll double click on sheet 2 and put in pivot, just so I know which is which is which. Now, if you ever want to change your pivot table, you just click right into it and change however you want. So it's very adjustable. You can click on these arrows, change it that way, and adjust what's shown that way. So you can always click on these little arrows. I think that's probably enough for a simple basic budget. I wanted to keep this nice and simple. Thanks for checking it out.